Man, they about to take us on a tour. Independence Hall. Took a lifetime to get here. They got all my friends. This is where they signed the Constitution, I think. Man, I don't know my American history. I had a hard time in American history. I didn't like American history. Thanks, man. Well, this is it. This is it. This is it, y'all.
Come on in, come on up. Come on in. Guys, make sure that if you're shorter that you can see. Make sure your knees don't go between the posts. We can't get you out without a lot of pain. Trust me on that. Okay? Everybody in? Okay, on behalf of the National Park Service, I'd like to welcome you to the Pennsylvania State House. How many of you thought I was going to say Independence Hall?
Me.
We all did. But in reality, Pennsylvania State House is the name of this building. Independence Hall is a nickname given it by Lafayette at the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Only 3 of our founding fathers, or signers of the Declaration, you know what you're talking about. They're John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Charles Carroll. Those are the only 3 alive at the time of the 50th anniversary. This is the seat of government for the colony of Pennsylvania, the nation state of Pennsylvania under the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, and finally, the U.S. state of Pennsylvania under the United States Constitution. During the colonial period, they had 3 branches of government, but they're different from what we're used to. They had a legislative branch across the hall from us. It's called the Assembly. They're elected. It's 1 chamber. Upstairs, you have the governor's office, is what we would call it. It was called, really, the proprietor's office. There was only a governor here when the Penns were not. They would then send somebody as the governor. This is a proprietary colony. It is not a royal colony like New Jersey. Now, William Penn gave the Charter of Privileges in 1701, which allowed freedom of religion and self-government. Penn family is really good, or his descendants, about the freedom of religion. This is the only place you can worship any way you want. You cannot do it in the other colonies. They all have official religions. But they're lousy when it comes to the self-governance. In fact, it's so bad that by 1763, the Assembly sends Benjamin Franklin to England to get rid of the Penn family. They want to become a royal colony. And he arrives about the time that they start passing all of these acts. The Townshend Acts, the Intolerable Acts, the Coercive Acts, the Sugar and the Tea Act, and on we go. The Stamp Act, of course. And so all the other colonies will ask him to represent them over there. All of these acts, before he can get he'll be very successful in rescinding a lot of them. But before he can get it done, there will be ramifications here in the colonies. And all of those will end up in the judiciary, the 3rd branch of government. Now, as we look around this room, we see things that are very familiar to us. Jury box, a witness stand, a court reporter's desk, evidence box, judge's bench, and even Lady Justice is up there. Yeah, justice has always come from a woman. Think about it. But we also have some things that aren't so familiar. The dock. Do I look innocent or guilty? Huh. I don't think I want you guys on my jury. Yeah, it's a pretty bad optic, isn't it? But we will keep the term to stand trial. You'll notice there's no chair behind me. And you, in fact, would also be standing out there to ensure justice was done. However, if you protest, if you refuse to follow these new acts, you're going to end up in here, aren't you? But we've got something happening in the jury boxes, and it's called jury nullification. This is when they put the law on trial instead of the individual. And nowhere do they do it in such grand fashion as they do up in Boston. Now, Boston is a little unique because unlike here in Philadelphia, the British didn't stay here. They actually went out to the line. They didn't do that in Boston. They stayed right there. And so the British are very, very well aware of what's going on in the courts. And by 74, they're enraged. And so Parliament passes the Boston Port Closure Bill. Abigail Adams described it like this: our ports are shut, our commerce is ruined, and the halls of justice closed. Thousands reduced to want, all the horrors of civil war on one hand, and the bonds of slavery forged for us on the other. Civil War. Abigail Adams still considers herself British because that's a war between the same peoples. As she's writing that, they will dispatch Paul Revere to Philadelphia. He'll get here in 6 days. Go to City Tavern, they'll have a meeting, what to do about this. Boston is asking Philly for help, the largest of the cities. And Philadelphia says we'll hold a meeting and invite all of the colonies. And that meeting today we call the First Continental Congress. If they can close Boston, they can close any of us. That is the concern. Now, before we go over to where the Second Continental Congress was held, I need to talk to you a little bit about the building because otherwise you're not going to be satisfied. I know that. Construction started in 1732, the same year as George Washington was born. 90% original in the bricks outside, inside is about 70 with the woodwork interior. 77, 78, the British occupied Philadelphia and they trashed the place. It's used as a hospital and hold American officers who are POWs. Everything will have to be redone. All the furniture will be burned to keep heat and things on that order. Now you can tell this is a replica because I've had my hands all over it, right? What about these chairs and furnishings? You know, I'd never touch those. But I can't tell you they're original. They're period pieces, meaning they're from the time, but they do not meet the criteria of person, place, and event. I don't know who sat in that chair. I can tell you it came through the Revolutionary War. I don't know where it was. It could have been somebody important's chair. It also could have been the town drunks. I just don't know. And so because I don't know, it's called a period piece. The only piece we call original in this room is the Pennsylvania Coat of Arms. Put up there in 1785. What was up there previous until July 8th, 1776, was the unicorn and the lion. the symbol of British authority throughout the world. But on July 8, 1776, Colonel John Nixon will read the Declaration of Independence to the public for the very first time, and upon completion, send in a regiment to remove it. And that night, they'll burn it. Is this obstruction of public property? Is it treason? Or was it the lawful removal of an object based on the Declaration of Independence? It all depends on who's doing the talking, just like today. Let's go across the hall and do some more talking.
Well, that's why I flunked American history. Well, I didn't flunk it. I think I passed it, but I struggled. This is Independence Hall, fam. You know what? I was blessed to get in here. I'm not even supposed to be in here right now because you need a special ticket to get in here. And I went over there to try to get a special ticket, and they said, "Oh, we all out of tickets. You can't get in today. Come tomorrow." I said, "Man, I'm not gonna be here tomorrow." And so I just walked over here. I was hoping that somebody would feel sorry for me and let me in. And some lady had a ticket, an extra ticket. She gave it to me. See how God worked? That was God. God know my heart.
The Second Continental Congress in the spring of '75. They arrived thinking that there's going to be communication based on what they'd said from the First Continental Congress. They will be disappointed. Ben Franklin has finally returned after 11 years. And he only returned because they threatened to hang him. He knows there's going to be no communication. They call him the most dangerous man in America. What is waiting for them is news that fighting has broken out up in Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is now fighting all on her own, the world's superpower. And what do they do about it? Nothing. It'll be 2 months before John Adams will nominate the only man to come in a military uniform, the only man to have the approbation of all, and that is George Washington. And he's nominated to go up and start an army. Now, we have a mythology. And boy, we won this war all by ourselves. But that's all it is a myth. The French helped us, the Spanish helped us, the Dutch helped us. You can see it. In fact, everybody who hated England helped us, which meant the rest of the world. Yeah, but it'll still take them another year before Richard Henry Lee, on the 7th of June, 1776, will make the motion we ought to be free and independent states, seconded by John Adams. And what did they do? They did what they always did. They tabled it and started a committee. John Adams is going to be the chairman. He's on 53 other committees, chairing half of them. Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Mr. Livingston, and Mr. Sherman. And their job is to come up with a document which will explain to the rest of the world why this comes under the rule of law and is not treason. They decide that they are going to use Locke's idea that government is actually a social contract. It is a contract between the people doing the governing and the people being governed. And under contract law, if one side breaks the contract, does the other side have any obligation? And so they list all the ways in which the Crown and the Parliament have broken that contract with the colonies for the last 15 years. And then they handed it over to Thomas Jefferson and said, make a document out of it. You're only on one of the committee, keep that time. And he does. And he brings it to Ben. Ben takes out his editorial pen, and he makes 40 changes. The most important, of course, being, or no, I should say, is he changes sacred to self-evident. He will also take out all the stuff Jefferson put in about slavery. And he'll take it out for two reasons. One, Benjamin Franklin knows that facts and words matter. He doesn't want any Pinocchios. And Jefferson's facts just plain are not right. You cannot blame King George III in 1776 for something that happened in 1619. It won't fly. And then we have practical politics. Ben knew we needed everybody. And this has been a hot button issue already since 1750. Better to try to fix it. Get everybody pulling in the same direction. They bring it in, they haven't voted yet. In fact, it's July 2nd when they will finally vote to declare independence. John Adams is so excited. He writes to his wife and children that July 2nd will be your annual festival, celebrated with cannonades, parades, and games, sports, and shows, and worship, and illuminations from one end of the continent to the other, from this time forevermore. Did you all celebrate July 2nd? No. No, we don't, because they took up their editorial pen here too and made 45 more changes. And so it's not until noon on July 4th that the document is sent to Mr. Dunlap, the printer. And because he gets it on July 4th, what date did he put on it? July 4th. It's only going to happen on July 4th. But that's what people read, that's what they see, and that's what they hear. That puts us in a unique position, because that's what we want to celebrate. Other countries mark their birthday throughout the military victory. The signing of a treaty, some sort of legislative action, not us. It's from the day we publish a set of ideals, values, and goals, that all men are created equal, that you have the right to decide who's going to govern you, that you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Very radical stuff for the 18th century. But you can publish all those you want. It's not going to get it for you. It'll take 7 years of war. It's only after those demonstrations that they decide to do a signed copy, and they will do a signed copy in this room. The majority of them, 50 will sign in here on August 2nd. Politicians only do what they think they have support for. That was true then, and it is true now. During the war, they organized themselves under something called the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. It's kind of like the European Union, only it had some major flaws. Things like you couldn't change it. Okay? And so by 1787, these nation states are more frenemies than they are BFFs. And so again, we'll find 13 tables, this time for 13 nation states. In this very room. Now, is anybody here from Rhode Island? Rhode Island. See, she never shows up. And by not showing up, she can stop them from changing the Articles of Confederation under the rule. So what can they do? They decided it wasn't worth changing to begin with, and they realized that they could come up with an alternative form of government to submit for consideration by the Confederation Congress. That's what they do. 12 men will get up and walk out saying that isn't what they were sent here for. 4 others would sit through 4 months of argument, debate, and finally compromise. And then they too refused to sign. Ben Franklin is watching it unravel. And at 81, he struggles to his feet and gives a speech. He says, when you get this number of men together, with all their bias and all their prejudices, it amazed him that the document came so near to perfect. And he begged them to sign. After he had signed, he turned and said, he had often looked at the sun on the back of the president's chair. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the chair that George Washington sat on.
That's the chair.
Constitutional Convention.
That's the chair that George Washington sat on during the Constitutional Convention.
Was a rising
Right there.
or a setting sun. He now had the happiness to know that it was, in fact, a rising sun. Today we call that chair
That's the actual chair, y'all.
rising sun chair.
It's called the Rising Sun Chair.
The Constitution isn't a very big document. This was the size of the paper it was written on. And this is the entire thing. It gives us a framework for government. Tells us why we have a government, what they're supposed to do. Tells us the different jobs. And the very first line is the American people's job. It says, we the people form a more perfect union. How are you going to do that in 2021? To provide for the common defense, to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for our posterity. Do you know who our posterity is? It's you. Even children are in the Constitution. But I will give you one more thing. I would say every generation has to answer to it. Is it going to be a rising or a setting sun under your leadership? And you've been given a republic. Are you going to keep it? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I will take questions outside.
This concludes the tour. So that's the actual seat that George, thank you, good job. That's the actual seat that George Washington sat in to sign the Constitution. Wow, that's it.